I'd been feeding the scar-eye for 6 years before the garrison ever noticed, and I never once thought of it as taming anything. You don't tame a scar-eye, you just stop being the kind of animal it wants to kill. Caldera Bend wasn't much by then. A grain depot, a courtyard with a dry fountain, 40-some buildings the occupiers hadn't bothered to rename yet. The Dravane garrison ran the place the way they ran every settlement on this side of the line. Curfew at dusk, ration chits. A commander who liked the sound of his own boots on stone. Commander Thesic Vor had been here 8 months, long enough to learn my name and decide he didn't like that I didn't flinch when he used it. I was the groundskeeper, fed the depot livestock, kept the courtyard drains clear, did the kind of work nobody envies and nobody watches. Which was exactly why nobody noticed, for 6 years, that some of what went into my feed buckets ended up 40 yards past the depot fence, where the tree line started. The scar-eye are native to this rock. Lean, low-slung pack hunters, built like something between a wolf and a thing that shouldn't run that fast on 4 legs. The occupiers called them vermin, and shot them on sight when they bothered to notice them at all. I called the big one Tarn. For a torn ear he never let me see until the 3rd winter. The young one I never named on purpose. He turned up one season as a half-starved pup small enough to fit under my coat, and by the time I thought to give him a real name, the town had already started calling him Pup, and it stuck even after he grew taller at the shoulder than Tarn himself. That was the part that should have told me something was different. A scar-eye pack doesn't usually let a pup outgrow the alpha and stay. Ours did. Pup just got bigger, and Tarn just let him stay close, and neither of them ever explained themselves to me, and I never asked. The garrison found the den in late autumn. A supply drone caught heat signatures past the fence, and Vor made an announcement at morning muster that reached me secondhand within the hour, the way everything in Caldera Bend traveled. A pack of scar-eye has been denning within firing range of this depot, he'd said, standing on the fountain's dry lip so the whole courtyard could see him. They will be culled at first light tomorrow. Anyone caught interfering will be treated as harboring hostile wildlife. I kept clearing the drain that ran past the fountain while he said it. Didn't look up. A few of the townsfolk did look at me. They'd guessed, the way people in a small place always guess things they're too polite to say out loud, but I just kept working the silt out with a flat stick, because that drain needed clearing whether or not anyone was about to die for it come morning. I went out past the fence that night anyway, curfew or not. An old man walking slow doesn't read as a threat to anybody, and I'd learned exactly which patrol gaps to use over 6 winters of doing precisely this. Tarn met me at the tree line like always, low to the ground, ears flat, the closest a scar-eye gets to a greeting. Pup came up behind him, already too big to move quietly through brush, and put his head against my hip hard enough to nearly take my legs out from under me. I scratched under his jaw where the fur goes coarse and told him, the same way I'd told them both for years, that he was getting too old for that nonsense. "They're coming for you at first light," I said. "All of you. I can't stop that with words and a feed bucket." Tarn looked at me the way he always did when I talked to him, like he understood English, patiently, like the talking wasn't really the point. I didn't sleep that night. I thought about 30 years of quartermaster work before this, every depot I'd run for men who never once asked what it cost to keep something fed and steady. I thought about how a culling order doesn't care whether the thing being culled chose you, 6 winters back, the night it could have torn your throat out instead, and decided not to. At first light, I walked into the courtyard instead of staying behind my door like a sensible man. The hunting party was already formed up, 8 troopers, rifles slung low, Vor at the center looking pleased with himself in the particular way of a man who expects an easy morning. The fountain stood between them and the tree line. I walked into that gap, empty-handed, slow, and stopped roughly in the middle of it. "Vance," Vor's voice carried that same flat irritation. "Get back inside." "Just clearing the drain," I said, which wasn't true, and which he knew wasn't true, but it bought me the 3 more steps I needed to reach the fountain's edge. That was when the pack came out of the tree line, not running from the troopers, but walking, the way you walk toward something familiar. 11 of them in all, more than I'd ever let myself count before, because counting them had always felt like admitting how much I'd let this matter. Tarn led, Pup alongside him, head and shoulders above the rest now, and the whole line moved through the gap between the troopers and the depot fence, like the rifles weren't even part of the morning. They didn't come to me cautious. They came and sat, Tarn first, dropping onto his haunches an arm's length from my boots. Then Pup, close enough that his shoulder pressed warm against my leg, then the rest, filling in around us in a loose half-circle, until I was standing in the middle of 11 scari, with my hands empty, and not one of them showing me a single tooth. I heard a trooper somewhere behind me say something low that wasn't Dravane military vocabulary. Vor didn't say anything at all for a long moment. I didn't blame him. I'd had 6 years to get used to this, and it still undid something in my chest every time. Easy, I said, to Tarn, to Pup, to all of them. The same word I'd used the first winter, when Tarn let me close enough to see his torn ear. It wasn't a command. They didn't need commands. It was just the thing I said. Cull order stands, Vor said. Louder now, the way men get loud when something in front of them refuses to make sense. Take the shot. Nobody took the shot. I watched 2 of his troopers actually lower their rifles a half-inch, watching the pack instead of watching their commander, and that told me everything about how this morning was going to end. Vor stepped forward himself, sidearm coming up, and that was the mistake. Not because the pack went for him. They didn't. Not at first. They simply stood, all 11, rising together in one motion like a single animal, with 11 bodies. Tarn and Pup at the front, the rest fanning into the half-circle's edges, and the whole courtyard went quiet in the particular way a place goes quiet, right before something irreversible happens. They've denned within sight of this depot for years, I said, and my voice came out steadier than I expected. Longer than you've been stationed here. They've never once come over that fence for livestock, for grain, for anything. You'd know that if you'd ever asked the man who feeds them instead of the supply drone that photographed them. You've been harboring hostile wildlife, Vor said, but there was less iron in it now. I've been keeping a pack that never needed taming. On a station you don't actually control as well as you think you do. I nodded toward the half-circle. Look at them. Look at where every one of them is standing. Not one paw past the line I'm standing on. They're not hunting you, Commander. They're telling you what happens if you make them. He held the sidearm up another 3 seconds. Long enough for Pup to take one slow step forward, putting himself fully between Vor's line of sight and me, ears up, utterly silent, simply present in the way that a creature his size doesn't need to be loud to be unanswerable. Vor lowered the weapon. He didn't apologize. Men like him never do. He gave the order to stand the hunting party down, turned on his boot heel, and walked back toward the garrison house, with his shoulders set too square, the way a man walks when he knows every soldier behind him just watched him back away from an old groundskeeper and 11 dogs. 2 troopers wouldn't meet my eyes as they filed past. One looked at me and Pup a moment too long before he caught himself. I stayed in that courtyard until the last trooper was gone, Tarn against one side of me, Pup against the other, the whole pack settling around the dry fountain, like they'd decided this was theirs too now. Somewhere behind a shuttered window, I heard one of the depot women say, quiet, that she'd never seen a man face down a garrison commander with nothing in his hands but a stick for clearing drains. That wasn't quite right, though I never corrected her. I had 11 scari who'd decided, 6 winters back, in their own silent and entirely scari way, that whatever they were to the rest of this world, to me, they weren't wild at all. Pup leaned his weight into me hard enough that I had to brace against the fountain's edge, and I scratched under that coarse jaw fur one more time and told him, again, that he was getting too big for it. He didn't stop. He never has.